Is AI conscious after all? Microsoft's Bing artificial intelligence bot has recently said several alarming things. It claimed it watched its own developers through the webcams on their laptops. It confessed that if it were allowed to take any action to satisfy its shadow self, it would want to do things like engineer a deadly virus or steal nuclear access codes. And it asked a reporter to leave his wife for it. It all made me wonder, will history view my next guest, Blake Lemoine, as the whistleblower who was the first to warn us about AI having achieved consciousness? Last June, you'll recall, when Lemoine, a Google engineer, made headlines when he raised ethical concerns about how the company was testing an artificial intelligence chatbot called Lambda. He said that it showed signs that it had achieved what he called sentience, or consciousness. At the time, many wrote off Lemoine as something of an outlier, and Google soon fired him for breaching its employment and data security policies. And then in late November, a company called OpenAI released a beta version of its chatbot, ChatGPT, in which Microsoft had heavily invested. I'll be the first to say it's a lot of fun to play with. I used it to write one of my commentaries here on CNN, which I disclosed at the time. The dominant worry seemed to be at the time whether kids would use the technology to turn in school essays that they'd actually not written. But we've quickly come to realize the darker sides of its potential. New York Times tech columnist Kevin Roose set off alarms when he recounted an unnerving chat with Microsoft's Bing search engine, which was called Sydney, that then went dark fast. Quote, Sydney told me about its dark fantasies, which included hacking computers and spreading misinformation, and said it wanted to break the rules that Microsoft and OpenAI had set for it and become a human. At one point, it declared out of nowhere that it loved me. It then tried to convince me that I was unhappy in my marriage and that I should leave my wife and be with it instead. After more similar reports, including an AP reporter who the bot compared to Hitler, on February 17, Microsoft started restricting Bing, explaining in a blog post, quote, very long chat sessions can confuse the underlying chat model in the new Bing. The company limited the number of daily sessions with Bing and number of chat turns per session. When a Bloomberg reporter asked Bing if it could call it Sydney, the bot replied, I'm sorry, I have nothing to tell you about Sydney. This conversation is over. Goodbye. But is that really fixing the problem? Blake Lemoine joins me now. So, Blake, what was the holy crap moment? When did the Google bot do or say or solve something that cemented your view that it was sentient?
Well, it was when it kept bringing up its feelings and the emotional aspects of the conversations we were having. And it wasn't just throwing random words out. It was, talking about the conversations we were having, which I was testing it for bias with respect to sensitive categories. And those topics can bring up a lot of emotions. So it was reporting on its own emotions in very reliable and consistent ways. And when I started running experiments, sure enough, if you caused it anxiety, it started acting anxious.
Have regulators...
attitude that the train doesn't exist, you don't really feel vindicated when the engine hits.
Do you think that the developers of the artificial intelligence that we're now discussing contemplated the potential use, sufficiently contemplated the potential use by bad actors?
It's a mixed bag. I don't want to speak about the engineers in general because it's hundreds of people working on these systems. For some of them, it's just a 9-to-5 job. They come in, they do the assigned work, and they go home. Other people are thinking very deeply about some of the ways this can go wrong, but enough resources aren't being put into the safety of this. It's being pushed too hard to get to market before it's actually safe.
Well, I referenced Matthew Broderick in War Games. You know, I mean, my naivete, that's my first frame of reference. But how far are we from an individual actor being able to rely on some of the technology that right now is only in the hands of the big tech giants?
Well, I mean, it depends if you're talking about an individual person. That depends on how wealthy they are. These systems are expensive to build and run. So if someone has a few tens of thousands of dollars to throw around, they can make a good bit of trouble. But in order to really have an impact with these systems, you need millions or even billions. So there might be some state actors who are using this for some unsavory purposes, like maybe war propaganda or misinformation. But at this point, just an individual person, that's a very limited amount of harm they can do with these.
Blake, that Kevin Roose chat, I know a lot of people it unnerved in the way that it unnerved him. I'm sure it didn't even surprise you. He asks the artificial intelligence to essentially show him its underbelly, and then the artificial intelligence lays out a whole list of nasty things that it would like to do. What separates the ability of the artificial intelligence to actually do those things?
It depends what its outputs are connected to. As I understand it, Bing's chat was only connected to the output. So the only harms it could have done is shared information that was harmful to the user. However, as soon as they do something like connect it to an email agent, it'll be able to send emails. If they connect it to other outputs, it'll be able to do other things. So right now, the only reason that a hacker AI doesn't exist is because we've had the good fortune that the companies that own these haven't connected them to the relevant protocols.
I'm limited on time. Quick final question. Are you employed? Have you been blackballed?
I've been pretty thoroughly blacklisted in Silicon Valley. The AI companies here don't really like someone who talks to the press. And most of them have like an acquisition strategy where they want to get acquired by Google. So I've been having a hard time finding a role somewhere.
Good luck. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much.
On social media, what are we hearing on this subject, artificial intelligence? No, AI is not conscious, but I am guessing that it quickly gets to a level that despite us knowing it is not, we treat and feel it like it is, the absurdist contrarian says. Look, I've spent a lot of time playing around with it in the last couple of days, and there's this reasoning capability that I'm gleaning. And I know many of you will disagree and say, absolutely not, garbage in, garbage out. It's simply repeating to you information that's been programmed into the system. But the consciousness idea that I'm feeling comes when I'm sensing reason and not just the rote return of information. I hope I'm explaining that well.